Hello and welcome to another lecture and talk for the New Zealand Debate Development for the Regions program. This video here, I'm going to chat you through how to give a first speaker speech. So if you're a second speaker or a third speaker, I believe there are videos out there in the series for you as well. So feel free to jump across to those ones because they'll be much more relevant to you. If you're interested, feel free for you to listen. But other than that, I'm going to jump into it. Before I do so, though, I'd encourage you, as I always do at the start of every lecture, please take out a pen, please take out a piece of paper and take notes. Because as I always say, if you listen, it's great. You take notes, it's even better. You can practice it later. It's the very best you can do. Perfect, let's jump into it. What is a first speaker's job? Probably pretty important to know if you're going to be a first speaker because you actually want to do your job right. So, firstly, you need to outline what is your team going to do in the debate. This is the kind of first of three main grouping categories. I'm just going to cover them off quickly here, these three, and then I'll get into them in more depth throughout the different slides I go through. So what is your team going to do in the debate, like I said? This can involve just kind of outlining a couple of things. This can involve things like your model, your framing, just kind of giving me an outline for kind of what is your case, and what points are your team going to present? So let me know what you're going to be talking about and what your second speaker is going to be talking about, just so the judge has a bit of an idea of kind of where this whole thing is going. Because if they know where it's going, it's much easier for them to follow what you're talking about. Second, what setup is needed for the debate? Well, I just covered that.
All good?
Just flip back to the first slide and I'll start. Yeah,
Sounds good. No worries, no worries.
Just it's on the first slide. I'm just going to ring up. Hello and welcome to another video for the New Zealand Regional Development Debating Series. These videos are here to help you guys become better debaters, particularly those in the regions, particularly high school New Zealand debaters. This is who we're trying to do our best to help out and to help you guys become excellent debaters, even better than you already are. So, what I'm going to cover in this this lecture actually. I was so focused on debating because I was giving this lecture, I flipped the words around. However, what I'm going to tell you about, do you reckon I can just start again?
It's fine, no worries, no worries. Yeah.
Hello, Elliot Jones. This is the third take and this is the actual one you should use. Hello and welcome to this video. It's another video in our series for the Regional Debate Development Program, which is here to help debaters across the regions of New Zealand become better at debating and even more exceptional than you already are. In this lecture, I'm going to cover off how you do a first speaker's speech. So if you're a second or a third speaker, feel free to jump to those videos, which are also in the series, which should help you out with how to do those different speeches. If you want to stay around though and learn how to do a first speaker speech, just in case you get called up one day, feel free to do that as well. Let's jump into it and chat about what we're going to do. I'm about to read out what's on that slide, but I almost forgot that there are kind of three key things I'd like to let you know, as I always do at the start of every lecture. One, listening to the lecture is great. Two, getting out your pen and paper right now is even better, so make sure you take notes during this lecture. And three, I would encourage you afterwards to go and practice. I know I always say it, I'm probably sounding like a broken record if you've listened to more than one of these videos, but I very much encourage you to do it. So, without further ado, I'm going to jump into what I actually said I would do on this slide. So, what is a first speaker's job? You're going to do three kind of broad key things in your speech. I'm going to cover those each in more category in a moment. But one is to let us know, what is your team going to do in the debate? Number two, so that includes things like just kind of letting me know what points you're going to cover, like broadly, like what is your approach to the debate? Secondly, what setup is needed for the debate? Like anything like models, like framing. I'm going to talk about this all in more detail in a moment. But like anything that is required to kind of understand broadly how you're going to be like going about this motion that's also needed. Your third and final job, probably your most key one, is to provide two key substantives, which are just 2 points for your team. And they should be your best 2 points that you're bringing out in your first speech. That'll be the bulk of your time. Let's jump to the next slide. So, what is your team doing? Probably a good thing to let the judge know. I say this a lot, but it's because I'm a judge, and I know other judges, I know this helps them out a bunch, and it makes you more likely to win debates when the judge knows what's actually going on. In the same way you give them kind of a map when you go traveling on Google, it's probably good that you give your judges a map of what your team is going to approach in this debate. 3 key steps to this. Firstly, you obviously need an introduction. I would like to say, please, do not introduce the motion to me again. I already know it. Please do not introduce the other speakers and welcome them to the debate. And I don't need you to welcome me as a judge, because you're just burning valuable time that you could be using, giving me your excellent speech material in the format I'm just about to give you. So what you can do instead is you can be humorous, you can be emotive, you can give any number of intros. If you're stuck for one of my favorites is to paint a little bit of a picture of the world. The debate generally is covering an issue. So explain to me either why what opposition is standing for and their kind of world that they're presenting would be so bad, or explain to me why the world that you are standing for is so good. Make it nice and quick, nice and snappy, but it just kind of paints a nice picture of what the debate's going to look like. Secondly, let's chat about a path to victory. I think you should outline for the judge the way in which you think you're going to go about winning a debate. So for example, I know I use the smoky debate analogy a lot, but it's just because it's nice and easy to use. So for example, if I'm doing a smoky debate, I'm going to say, I'm going to talk you through why there are significant harms to the New Zealand general public. And because we decided they're going to have the most harm, particularly during health related effects, we're going to win this debate. So explain to the judge the way in which you think you're going to try and win, because it means that when you achieve that, the judge is more likely to buy that you're kind of, gone about winning that. Thirdly, you need to give me your team split. This is just, what are the 2 substantives I'm going to be giving in my speech? They are 1, 2. And what is the split point that my second speaker will be doing, also known as your third substantive? My second speaker will bring you a split on whatever the title is for that point. So just have the 3 titles there. The judge knows what's coming, they can jot them down on their page and follow that better. Perfect. Setup. You also need to do some setup before you actually get into your substantives. What does this cover? 2 key stages to this. One is a model. What is a model, you're probably asking? A model is pretty much just how do you plan to implement what the motion says. This is generally something you do on the affirmative side, not so much something you do on the negating side. There is things called counter modeling, but I would save that for another lecture because it's much more complicated. Modeling is just, how are we going to go about doing this thing? You can add some details. Don't overdo it. Just give me a few specifics for anything you want to clarify. For example, I'm going to implement a sugar tax would be the motion. And then you take that motion and be like, okay, when we implement this sugar tax, we would implement it over a rolling period of 3 years. We wouldn't just like snap our fingers and magically have sugar tax appear on the shelves, because that makes it a little bit easier to kind of like have less damages because it takes longer to roll out. It's always a good thing to do. So that's an example of one thing you might put in your model. Framing. What is framing? Framing is pretty much just things about the world that you're trying to understand and contextualize for the judge to make it easier for you to win the debate. I've often heard it called the way to win debates without making arguments. I think that's a little bit excessive to call it that. But I'll actually explain more what framing is in my lecture on framing, because it's quite a large subject and quite a difficult one to explain. So I'm not going to try and cram it into this lecture. This is just where you should put it in your speech. So like on your notes, say, when I get to this point, I should be looking at doing some framing. Perfect. Substantives. You should have 2 of them, like I told you, because I just told the judge what they are. You should go through and you should present those substantives. There should be 6 steps you have. It should be your title, your roadmap, your context, your mechanisms, your outcomes, and your impacts. If that sounds unfamiliar to you because that's the first time you've heard those 6 steps, I would jump back a video and look at the video on how to do a substantive point, because you can't do substantives well, you can't do a first speech well. This is going to be the bulk of your speech time, the majority of your debate. You should spend the most time doing this, because if these aren't good, you can't win the debate. That's pretty much it. That's all I have to say on substantives. And obviously, once you've done your first substantive, repeat that same process and do your second substantive. Perfect. How is negating different? Often a question I get asked, because obviously they are slightly different. On negating, you're probably not going to have to model, you're probably not going to have to frame as much. So, what do you do with that extra time? Here's what you do. You should do one, a little bit of rebuttal at the start of your speech during that kind of minute or so that you would have been spending doing that modeling, that framing, etc. Rebuttal, how you do that, obviously covered in a different lecture that you will watch, but that's what you should put into that slot if you're on side negating. What you don't need to do is respond to everything they've said in their speech, because that's way too hard to do in that short of a time. What you can do is you can step it through and just respond to their most important points. You don't need to take them out fully, but just do your best job and make sure they broadly are responded to, so it makes your second speaker's job easier. Secondly, I'd like to give you a quick tip that I love to do, is when I've done rebuttal, especially if it's on really important things to their case, just kind of wait it in the debate, say like, what is this actually doing in the debate? Is it quite important? Have I just mitigated the material, like made it less impactful? Or have I like taken out this block in my minute that's like the cornerstone of their case? If you have, don't say you have if you haven't, but if you have taken out that cornerstone, tell the judges, because it's good to know what that rebuttal is actually functionally doing in the debate. Perfect. That's the end of my slideshow. So what I encourage you to do now is I encourage you to go out, is to practice this as a group, as an individual. You can record those speeches, listen to them back, make sure you're taking on each and every one of those steps. I think you guys are going to be much better off if you do this format, because judges are going to follow it a lot better. Obviously, this is just kind of the skeleton, and you obviously need the kind of muscle and brains and everything else that goes around it, which are the lectures on substantives, rebuttal, framing, things like that. So go fill in those gaps, but at least you know what order you're doing it in now, because this is the best way to kind of go about it. That's all for today's lecture. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I guess I'll see you next time you're watching a lecture of mine. Thank you very much for listening.